Hi, I'm Asher Miller.
I'm Jason Bradford.
And I'm Rob Dietz. Welcome to Crazy Town, where Mad Max looks like a documentary. The topic of today's episode is the maximum power principle, and please stay tuned for an interview with our very own Richard Heinberg.
Hey, Rob and Jason. Nice to see you virtually.
Yeah, sort of.
Brought the band back together virtually because I wanted to channel my inner Andy Rooney. Can we do that?
Does anybody know who Andy Rooney is anymore?
I know, that's the whole thing. Go look it up, guys.
Andy Rooney, 60 Minutes.
You know how there's a whole thing with like when Tina Fey did her Sarah Palin impression? And she was like, I can see Russia from my house.
Yeah.
You know, she never actually said that, but now people actually think that Sarah Palin said that.
Yeah.
I have the same thing with Andy Rooney, you know, the whole like, you know what I really hate?
I hate everything.
Yeah, I don't think he ever said that, but that's what I'm going to channel, okay?
Yeah, right.
You know what I really hate? I want to bitch for just a second on what's happening with this rush to AI. We've been talking quite a bit about AI recently. A lot of people have. But it's basically like this war that these companies are waging against each other, and we're just the cannon fodder for it, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to build out as fast as they can, beat each other to dominate the market space, basically try to do a massive power grab. Yeah. And I think we're doing this Wayback Machine thing in our podcast archive, so we're going to play...
Crazy Town Classics.
Yeah, Crazy Town Classics.
Trademarked
it. TM. We did an episode on this concept called the power, maximum power principle, right? And made me think of that because we can bitch and moan like I love to do, but the truth is they're functioning in a quote unquote rational way in the marketplace, right?
Yeah, you know what I really appreciate about some of our earlier seasons and the episodes we recorded is that they looked at fundamental issues that could be applied to all kinds of scenarios. So like the AI one that you're bringing up, yeah, it's about, like you said, these companies trying to grab as much power as they can. They're sort of acting off of this fundamental principle. And I went back and listened to that episode and I was like, kind of, oh yeah, we covered that. I remember that. But it almost felt like learning something new. So it's one of the reasons we thought we should share that with people. And I also got to interview our colleague, Richard Heinberg, for that episode. And of course, he's always got these teachable moments and ideas. Hopefully we can apply that fundamental thinking to these issues that are up now.
Well, one of the areas that I've looked at recently that I can see the maximum power principle applying is what's going on in the food system. So we're having all this upending of the labor market. A huge proportion of the people that work in the food system, either on farms or in food processing centers, are Hispanic, and they may or may not be legal or documented. Some have visas, some don't. But the disruption in their lives and the farming communities has led to this big push. Well, this has been going on for a while, but the idea of trying to remove as much labor as you can. So more and more automation, larger equipment, robotics. And something that we do pretty well in this episode is we look at sort of trade-offs between things. So if you have less labor, you're going to try to use more exosomatic energy and technology, right? Or you're going to try to do things faster because we really are a time-focused species right now. And so anyway, I think we should just let this episode speak for itself. And I think listeners look at the world today through the maximum power lens and see where you can draw insight.
You know what I really hate? I hate people who use the word exosomatic.
Tough shit.
Share, Jason, it's that time of year where I like to hit the Oregon coast. What about you guys?
It's so warm over there.
I wouldn't go that far, but the
Relatively
ocean's
speaking.
nice. The beach.
Yeah.
I mean, beautiful beaches.
It's just beautiful. It's beautiful.
I would have found pirate ships out there.
This is not the Goonies movie, okay? As much as
You got my reference.
yeah, well, that should usually be my special little contribution to this podcast. But anyway, I bring it up because I was thinking maybe the three of us could get out there for a little R&R, a little vacation once we
yeah.
put the microphones down.
A little crazy
Can
travel.
we wait until I get my second shot?
Yeah, I'm actually scheduled as well. So I bring this up because I also want to have a competition with you guys.
Classic.
Of course you do.
Yeah.
I like to play games
You
when you
do.
go to the beach, There's all that sand. You could play Frisbee, you could play with the dog. But no, I want to play who can dig the biggest hole in an hour.
Okay.
And what I want to play with this game, I'm going to let each of us bring some item, some
How
artifact.
old are we, by the way?
I don't know.
I like to be like a 12-year-old when I go to the beach.
12? More like 6.
Ride the waves and
He does. He
Okay,
buys-
we'll
sand
dig
castles.
holes, man, if that's what you want to
yeah.
do.
So I want to invite you each to bring a tool, and we'll see who can dig the biggest hole. Jason, what are you going to bring?
Well, I've got a lot of shovels to choose from, and a couple of them I'm pretty good at using. So I'm just going to use a nice, sturdy shovel.
Well, you are a farmer who puts in a lot of work in the field.
Oh yeah,
so
I've got muscles building back now.
I'm a little scared of
Yes.
how much you can dig. How about you, Asher? What are you going to bring?
I can bring anything I want?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. How about a John Deere 410K backhoe?
Oh fuck!
A backhoe, baby.
Well, that's
geez,
pretty good. I
didn't-
think you if
Kick
I
the
were
shit out of you with that
Oh,
shovel of
I don't
yours.
know if I'm going to show up anymore.
Vegas is kind of far from the Oregon coast, but if I'm going there, I might lay a bet on you having a bigger hole at the end of an hour than Jason has.
Yes, and we're ignoring, any restrictions, license issues,
Yeah,
permits.
it's just-
any of
yeah.
that stuff,
Well,
right?
it doesn't matter anyway because I'm going to bring a Bagger 293 bucket wheel excavator.
Oh, that sounds like it's even bigger.
Yeah, what is that?
So it's the biggest mining machine ever created on the face of the planet.
How are you going to get it there, buddy?
Hey, details, all right? Let's not
Logistics.
yeah,
How
let's
big
not
are we
delve-
talking about? I thought I was going big.
You're
Well,
big.
okay, we put together I grabbed a table with some stats on it with some horsepower and kind of sand amounts we can expect to move in an hour and how big these things are. So let's do a little comparison.
I'm in last place.
So, Jason, how much does your shovel weigh?
I don't know, 5-10 pounds.
Okay, how about your backhoe, Asher?
8 tons, baby. 8 tons.
Well, my Bagger 293 weighs 14,200 tons.
Are you sure it'll fit on the beach?
It
Which
might.
beach are we going to?
Yeah, I know. Well, it's not going to be there for long after I start digging. Horsepower, Jason, we kind of talked about this.
Yeah.
You basically, we think a trained athlete can generate about 0.35 horsepower over an hour.
I'll be like 0.25 maybe.
Oh, I was going to say like 0.8, point,
Oh.
you're
plays
way
tennis,
beyond
like,
a
all
trained
the
athlete.
time.
Yeah,
But I could,
He's a farmer.
for an hour, I could probably work at a quarter horsepower, I'd say.
pretty solid.
Yeah, maybe a third.
And a share your backhoe.
About 106 horsepower.
So Jason, you're at one person over that hour. A share, that's the equivalent of about what?
Over 1,000
Over
people.
1,000 people. Yeah.
Yeah.
And my my Bagger 293 has over 22,000 horsepower. So I'm at over 222,000 people.
Nice.
Again, I don't think we can fit that many people on the beach. And I'm, of course, worried about, the 3-foot rule and all that, COVID stuff.
Hard to do these day and
This
age.
is incredible. So
If we're in Florida, we're clear.
So let me run through this a little bit. Like the excavation, we think Jason could get about 12 cubic feet cleared out. So that's like, what, digging a grave, basically,
Yeah,
or something
sure.
like that. And,
You're working hard, baby.
I doubt, who knows? Maybe in the sand, it's not as hard to dig as soil.
He's digging his
but-
own grave. Yeah.
But a share, you could get about 3,600 cubic feet, and I can get about 500,000 cubic feet. Of
Yeah.
course, weight-wise, we already said mine's 14,000 tons. So fuel usage, Jason, what, you need like a bologna sandwich or
Yeah,
something?
basically, I'm going to use probably about 300 kilocalories or something like that an hour, burning through that baby. So
And
yeah,
and a share over the course of an hour.
About 2 gallons of diesel.
Yeah, you might also eat a bologna sandwich while you're working that.
Yeah, multitasking.
Well, I need a power plant that produces 16.5 megawatts
over an hour. So that's a lot. So you're going to use orders of magnitude more fuel than even a share would use.
Yes, but this is actually leading us into what we're trying to talk about today, and it's the way that I win. Because
you set this up, didn't you?
Yes. Well, I chose the bagger because I'm going to win because, you'll have a little hole on the beach, Jason. You might have a nice trench on the beach. I can basically remove the beach.
The beach is gone.
Yeah. I do want our listeners, go look this thing up, the Bagger 293 bucket wheel excavator. We actually had it as the cover art for an episode a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
Really an amazing piece of machinery.
They're pretty cheap, right? Like just $100 million or something like that?
Yeah. It costs about $100 million.
Well, next year, when we do this next year in season 4, I'm going to get the Bagger 294.
Well, good luck with that. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how that works out. Yeah, there's actually only one of these in the world, I think. So. But no, the idea that we want to explore is that it's whoever can take in the most energy and create the most power, wield the most power, turn that into useful work that kind of wins the game these days.
Mm. Yeah, and that's fine if we don't give a shit about the consequences, right? Who cares if there's a beach left for our kids to play on?
Yeah, exactly. So what we're really talking about here is something called the maximum power principle. And the way that it works, it's a tendency that all living creatures follow and all people, since we're living creatures, most of us anyway. But I want to turn it to our resident biologist to maybe dig a little deeper here.
Yeah, maybe... Let's put Jason on the spot.
Okay.
Yeah. Jason, can you define the maximum power?
After I sneeze. Okay. We'll come to a simple definition, but a little of the history. There was a mathematician that got into ecology and sort of helped ecology turn into sort of a more mathematical discipline, Alfred Lotka. So he started developing theories around this and really got popularized a bit by an ecologist, well-known ecologist from the middle of the 20th century named Howard Odum. A descendant of his academically, Charlie Hall's talked about this a lot. And actually, Richard Heinberg is going to come out with a book dealing with this topic as well. And we were looking at definitions, and they've all sort of, rewritten these definitions. But our favorite we found was from a guy named John DeLong, another ecologist, and very succinct and clear. The maximum power principle states that biological systems organize to increase power whenever the system constraints allow.
So basically what he's saying, and you guys correct me if my interpretation is off, but the way I hear that is depending on what's in your environment, you as a creature out there will draw in energy as quickly as you can and turn it into work in an attempt to basically outcompete anybody else that's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just individuals, it's species, right? And
populations, yeah.
Yeah, and so our little digging competition, again, I just want to reemphasize that I'm the winner.
Yeah.
I maximized the power.
You were, theoretically, even though we were on the Oregon beach, it does not have a 16.5 megawatt power plant right there. Theoretically, you were still able to do this.
Yeah, details. I don't understand why you're so focused on the details.
So actually, I think the last bit there in DeLong's definition, I want to pick on that a little bit. Whenever the system constraints allow. Mm-hmm. Can we talk about what we mean by constraints? Like what kind of constraints do we think we're talking about here?
Well, this is I think the key point to get into, and that we often think about this is an efficient system, or we're trying to optimize for that or this, and really what it is we're making trade-off decisions in our work and how we design our work and the equipment we use, et cetera. So when I pick a shovel, I have a very simple tool, but it's going to take me quite a long time to do that work. So I am very low material use. I have a 5-pound shovel. I'm not using a lot of energy. My energy output's really low. It's just me, but I'm spending time and labor. So I'm very energy and material efficient with my shovel, but I'm pretty labor intensive and time intensive compared to Rob on the other end of the spectrum.
So those are the 4 constraints you're mentioning.
Yeah.
Labor, time, energy, and material.
Exactly.
I think you're leaving out a key one.
What's that?
Intelligence. We're very constrained in this podcast by intelligence.
All right.
No, but it is actually interesting what you said. If you compare the shovel to the
Right.
The Bagger 293,
the Bagger.
bucket wheel excavator.
Exactly.
The Bagger 293.
So that puppy is minimize the labor and the time, obviously.
Right.
Think about how much fucking sand you can move with that thing,
Yeah.
right? In a short period of time. Probably being operated. Well, they probably have a few people operating.
It takes a crew of 5. I didn't want that, again, details that I didn't want to get into, but I got to bring 4 buddies.
A lot of energy, a lot of materials to go into.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the sort of when people say, what are you what's an efficient use? You have to really understand, okay, are we defining efficiency what? Are we defining by labor efficiency, which this equipment that Rob brought is very labor efficient. The backhoe is pretty labor efficient, but it's not really energy efficient. In fact, I did some math, your table, I did some additional math on it, and I moved the most sand per unit of energy.
Wow.
Yes.
You
That
got
actually-
beat, buddy.
I beat you from efficiency on terms of energy.
That's not the competition, though, really, was it? I mean,
It was, it was
Hour
how much
in an
sand
hour.
can you move? How
But
big of a hole can you do?
that does remind me, we talked in a previous episode about how the bicycle is the most efficient way that people have invented to get around in terms of a calories in and distance traveled.
Right.
So it's basically the same
But
thing.
the problem, guys, you can't profit from that much.
This is
Right?
this is very true. So I mean, this gets to the idea of efficiency is that it depends. You focus what efficiency you're striving for based on what's abundant and what's scarce. So today, when energy and materials are cheap and abundant and easy to get to, we basically don't give a shit. We'll build a Bagger 293.
Right. We care about labor and we care about time.
Right. And I think the example I was thinking of with time has to do with transportation. A few years back, I got invited to a conference in England. And, of course, being the fuel-burning ass that I am, I flew. So, if you fly from the East Coast of the United States to London or somewhere in the UK, what does that take? Like 6-7 hours, maybe?
Yeah, maybe 5-6 hours.
Yeah, 5-6 hours.
Yeah. Well, compare that to the sailing voyage of Greta Thunberg, where, remember, she was coming over to the U.S. for a conference on climate, and she sailed from Plymouth, UK to New York on a racing yacht. And it only took 15 days, right? So compare which actually feels...
And that was like a racing yacht.
Yeah, that's a fast
Yeah.
yacht trip across. I actually read about it, said there was no toilet on board and no showers.
Those are
and not
details.
good
No
sleeping.
need to go into these details.
I was just like, wow, that's a bare bones ship. Good for Greta.
It definitely motivated them to go as fast as possible.
Right. But I mean, look at the difference there, right? Like here I'm getting this great time efficiency, and she's obviously, because she's a good person compared to me, is getting the energy efficiency, which is what we're talking about. We need to start looking at that.
Right. And I mean, we've talked about this maybe ad nauseum, but really a lot of this just comes back to energy, right?
Yeah.
For most of our history, energy was scarce, it was constrained, which means that we had to focus much more of our labor and our time on things. Things took a lot longer, took a lot more labor.
Well, and this idea of like competing and winning, it's easy to get in this mindset of, oh, I took the plane and I won because I got there in 6 hours instead of 15 days. I didn't even get seasick, and that's where the focus has come.
Yeah, and what's interesting is like we're kind of making jokes about this a little bit and making these kind of silly examples, but this has real world consequences, and they're actually geopolitically people think about this in terms of power and projecting power, and it actually can come down to literally, right, the quality of the fuels you have and your industrial production and all that's tied to then can you harness energy.
Yeah.
So a good example is talked about with historians is World War II, where the U.S. built up like the hydroelectric dam system during the Great Depression, right? We were putting all these installations along the Columbia River. That created this incredible electricity source for Washington, the state of Washington, and parts of Oregon as well, which allowed then these manufacturing plants from Boeing to get established and all these aluminum manufacturers. So we were able to churn out ships and airplanes in massive numbers quickly because we had this incredible electricity supply. We also had the most well-developed oil industry in the world. And so we were able to churn out better fuels, higher octane, more reliable supplies to fuel those planes and essentially, therefore, fly higher, faster, longer than competing powers in World War II. It made a difference.
Yeah, maximum power principle. If you can suck up that energy and get more resources going, you can outcompete.
And in fact, I mean, you look at wars broadly, but you look at World War II specifically, and a lot of the tactical strategies were really around minimizing access of the enemies North Africa,
right.
in Indonesia, these areas where the Japanese wanted to conquer these areas in order to have access to these resources.
The Caspian was a big area for that. Yeah, so definitely. But this also works, of course, not just in humans, but in other species. So there's really fun examples to think about. You lived in the desert, New Mexico, is that right?
Yeah, I was in Albuquerque for a few years and actually doing studies of ecosystems, including the lower Colorado River. So pretty big time desert, dry down areas.
Yeah, so it's interesting to think about like this idea, what you do, you change what you do depending on if resources or environment are scarce. And in desert, often
there's plenty of sand in the desert, Jason. It's not scarce at all.
All the backhoes we want.
Right.
Well, I'm thinking about different strategies, for example, for the plants. So like the cacti, right, have these columns and they're green and they're succulent. But one of my favorite plants is the ocotillo.
That is an awesome plant. I know you know plants way better than I do, but those are the ones with the big, long, spindly arms. They get these beautiful red flowers on the end of them.
And what happens after a rain?
The flowers come out.
Yeah, but also they leaf out. So they have these sort of ability to sort of just send out a bunch of leaves when there's water. But when there's not water, they go bye-bye. And so again, they're maximizing the intake of energy when the resources, this time water, allow them to do that.
Yeah, when that constraint temporarily goes away. Now, other animals have different strategies. So like I think of hummingbirds. So right now we have a lot of hummingbirds in our yard, and they aren't here in the winter because it's too cold. There's not nectar resources. These things will fly thousands of miles away and migrate, and they're always just making sure they're following where there's a lot of plant life and young flowers and insects.
Well, they should be really glad that we're warming up the planet then, because then they don't have to fly so far.
Yeah, let's hang out. And actually, some things like that are happening where birds are stopping migration because they're like, yeah, it's warm enough here year round.
You say you have hummingbirds in the yard, but I think I'm hearing red-winged blackbirds. I don't know if our mics are picking that up. But a little bonus for today's episode if they are.
But you think about like mammals have this constant demand, and so do hummingbirds, to always be burning energy. We're warm-blooded. Mm-hmm. And so mammals either have to migrate to find food sources. Think of the big migrations on the savanna, of those animals. Bison and stuff. Or
wildebeest, come on.
Wildebeest, right?
In the Serengeti.
But what some animals, like bears, hibernate. So they say, this is the winter, I'm going to just chill out and sleep and not burn much energy, right? So they're changing their power use according to the environment.
I feel like people are somewhere in between. Like I feel like I know some people who hibernate, kind of get shut down during the winter. I wouldn't mind doing that.
Do you ever find a snake den?
No.
Oh, those are pretty cool. You'll see like giant piles of snakes like tucked into like these dens, and they're doing the same kind of thing. They're just
keeping themselves warm,
trying to keep themselves warm and out of the cold, and then they move out into the sun when the days when they need to. Yeah.
But so we're talking about constraints, and the reason we're bringing this up is that the constraints of energy and other material resources has been lifted temporarily for us humans. But this maximum power principle, again, does not only apply to other species in the sense of like how they figured out how to maximize considering constraints, But other species also have gone crazy when they haven't had constraints.
Yes.
Right? And maybe my favorite example is one that's often talked about when people try to kind of illustrate the concept of overshoot, which we've talked a little bit about before, but I think really applies to the maximum power principle as well, and that is the story of St. Matthew Island. You guys familiar with that story?
Famous ecology story as well.
Yeah, so
tell it to me again, Daddy, please.
It's a nice bedtime story. Cuddle up, Rob. Get your pillow and your little bear, and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Tell you a
Reindeer,
nice story.
right? They land on the roof, and the guy in the red suit
that's
comes down
the one. That's the one I was.
Okay, kids. Here's what happens where you might die.
Here's what happened to the reindeer when you leave them alone. Santa goes away.
No, it's an amazing story. Please.
Okay, so. Back in World War II, we were just talking about World War II, the U.S. Coast Guard was really worried about the Japanese attacking the West Coast, right? Mm-hmm. And we set up and down the West Coast all kinds of, I think San Francisco had the most sort of, coastal whatever alarm system set up. But they decided that they needed to put some stations, U.S. Coast Guard want to put some stations, outposts up in Alaska area, Bering Strait. So they set up an outpost on this little island called St. Matthew Island, totally barren island. They set up some guys out there. They had some food supplies for them. Obviously, it's really, really fucking cold, right?
Yeah, and it's like, I'm looking at a map of it right now. It looks like it's basically halfway between Alaska and Asia.
Sarah Palin could see it from her house. So they had some emergency supplies, but they decided that they actually needed to bring some reindeer as well as backup in case they got iced in. They couldn't, no ships could come in and provide.
They're going to eat Rudolph and Donner and Dancer and Blitzen.
So they brought like 29 reindeers, like an emergency food supply for themselves, And of course, this was like in 1944. The war ended just, 18 months later or whatever it was, a year later, and they left. And they decided, well, let's just leave the reindeer here.
Yeah.
They seem pretty happy, right?
They just opened the pen and let them go, huh?
Yeah. And there's a biologist who heard the story years later, 15 years later, or a dozen years later, a guy named David Klein. And he decided he wanted to go see what the impact was on this island. What happened to these reindeer that were left behind? So he went there with an assistant, and he discovered something insane, right? So 29 reindeer had been left there. Guess how many were there just 12 years later?
Double.
No, more than that. 1,000.
Well, how fast do reindeer breed?
Every year.
That was not in my
my
biology class.
There were 1,350.
I was pretty close. I said 1,000.
So about 46 times the original number.
Yeah.
Right? In a dozen years.
Yeah.
Okay. And then he came back 6 years later. After that, he got some extra money or whatever it was. Came back 6,000.
Ooh.
So what were they eating?
They were eating lichen. So they had this situation where there were no predators.
Right, no wolves.
Nobody eating them, and they had this abundant food source. Reindeer apparently like lichen, and there was a lot of lichen
and
there.
You can fit the way that they fly, they could cover all kinds of distance
totally.
all over the island.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they weren't being put to work, they were left alone, right. Santa wasn't bugging them. But then, Klein came back 3 years later, only 3 years later.
Wow.
Went from 6,000 to 42.
Ouchie
6,000 to 42.
That's a pretty miserable 42.
And there was only one male in that population. So
luckily, that male had evolved into a carnivore and was eating the other reindeer. Is that right? Is that what happened? Do I have this story?
No matter how hard he tried to procreate, the tide was against them, and they're by the 80s they're all gone, right?
Wow.
So again, this is like
sort
people
of like
use
bell
this
bottoms. By the 80s, they were all gone.
Exactly. So this is an example that people talk about with overshoot, right? This reindeer population had an abundant resource, went kind of crazy, overshot the capacity of the ecosystem. They ate all the lichen up because they had no predators to check their population, and then they went essentially extinct on that island. But it is a good example of the maximum power principle. When you remove constraints, all species probably, or very many of them, would behave in that way.
Yeah, they're trying to maximize the intake of lichen, and in order to reproduce as fast as they can. So that's sort of like the work they're doing, right? The idea is you're converting the energy you intake into something. And that in this case is just reproducing. Like they don't They're not worried about shovels or excavators. They're basically just
thinking of these Charlie Sheen reindeer just going, winning.
And what's interesting to think about is like theoretically lichen is a renewable resource, right? Yeah. Okay, it grows, but it doesn't grow that fast. Have you ever sat and watched lichen grow?
It's fascinating.
Yeah. It doesn't grow anywhere near as fast as paint dries. I mean,
right.
But no, obviously that, like you said, Asher, that story has been used as a, hey, watch out for overshoot. But I do think dissecting it a bit in the maximum power realm is a good idea, because Jason, you were saying before, all living creatures, basically all these self-organizing systems have this tendency. People have it too, which was probably okay when we were in our foraging days, before we figured out how to make so many wondrous tools, and before we figured out how to grab this once-in-a-lifetime lottery major supply of energy in the form of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And it seems like, you could make the argument, well, humans are a lot smarter than reindeer. We're not gonna do what they did. But if you look at how we're behaving, it seems like we're right on the reindeer path here. If you kind of equate lichen to fossil fuel, I mean, we grab that stuff as fast as we can. Even once we've come to this time where we understand the climate impacts of burning so much fossil fuel, we're still fighting for more pipelines and more tar sands.
Oh, I know. Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, it's a riot because he, at one side of his mouth, he seems to be this liberal who cares about climate and believes in it, and then the next thing you know, it's like pushing through pipeline projects. Right. It's just absurd.
Well, the good thing is it's a lichen pipeline, so it's not nearly as damaging.
They got so much lichen in Canada. Oh my gosh.
I think there's an interesting paradox here. I mean, we've talked about sort of evolutionary biology stuff, adaptation over time, getting benefits. It's an evolutionary trait, I assume, this maximum power principle, right? It makes sense that so many species have it. But having that in the context of scarcity or limits of resources, he not only puts that into check, but we have that and a scarcity mindset as well that's sort of still built into us, right? Like these driving kind of, I don't know, these influences that we're not even like conscious
instinctual,
about.
Drives.
That we think we've been living in this period of the most material abundance imaginable. Yeah. But we're functioning as though we have the scarcity mindset to it. And at the same time, we're completely checked out on the likelihood that we're going to actually hit scarcity.
Well, here's what I think we need to do then. If we're going the way of the reindeer, we need to get what's your thing called again?
My what?
Your shovel?
Oh, it's the Bagger 293.
We just got to start digging graves with the Bagger 293 because we're gonna need them.
And let's just figure out how to do it with 3 people instead of 5. You guys are invited on my Bagger.
We'll get more.
Such a morbid picture, Jason. Do we really need the Bagger?
No, we'll just use your backhoe. You're right. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Can we just moderate this a little bit?
Moderate.
Okay. Good work, guys.
Stay tuned for our George Costanza Memorial Do the Opposite segment, where we discuss things we can do to get the hell out of Crazy Town.
You don't have to just listen to the 3 of us blather on anymore.
We've actually invited someone intelligent on the program to provide inspiration.
Rob, Jason, I wanted to share a review this time from Joanne BF on iTunes. Joanne says, these guys give us climate change activists a look at the state of affairs, with enough humor to make it feel like we're all in on the joke.
That's excellent.
That is sweet. First of all, it's great that an activist is listening to this show and getting something out of it. That makes me feel nice and warm. But, the 3 of us like to have fun together, and it's hard to talk about some of these subjects. You get tired, you get beaten down, so we have to make some jokes and try to spread a little cheer as we do it. So I'm glad that that's resonating with someone out there.
That's right. Everybody needs to try to enjoy the day.
Thanks for that review, Joanne. And if you like the podcast, please take a few minutes to just rate us or give us a review on your favorite podcast app.
Every decision I've ever made in my entire life has been wrong. My life is the complete opposite of everything I want it to be.
If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right.
Oh, righty here. We're going to do the opposite, huh? So what that means in this context, it's interesting because we've grown up in this culture where we've been optimizing for being labor efficient and time efficient, right? So if you ever run a business, it's like, how do you reduce the number of workers, right? How do you get things done faster? And I think the opposite then is to think instead of those efficiencies, right? To remind you what we talked about earlier in the show is that there's other things to optimize for, which would be like energy and materials. So it turns out that typically when you substitute human labor with machines, that you end up using more energy and materials, obviously.
Yeah.
And so the
It's like your shovel versus
the bagger.
The bagger example, right?
Right. Though that's the opposite. That's the opposite incentive, structure we've had, and it's the opposite strategy. But anyways, the first thing to do is recognize what you're doing, right? Recognize what's being optimized for, and knowing that there's these different things to optimize for: labor, time, energy, materials.
I'm picturing you, Jason. Every time somebody says something's efficient, you're like. You're very skeptical. You're trying to figure out efficient at what?
What are you talking
what
about?
Resource are we talking about? What's the constraint here?
Yes, exactly.
But human societies have made these calculations, whether they're conscious about it or not, depending upon the kind of the constraints that they had. So, I was thinking about the pyramids, the pharaohs.
Aliens made those, right?
Right.
Right.
Very efficient for us.
They were made by reindeer.
No, but so they were made by my people.
Oh,
way
good.
back when.
Oh, congratulations.
Who are your people?
The Jews. There were lots of slaves that were involved. But, for them, I think the Pharaoh's motivation was, you got to get this fucking thing built pretty quickly. And by pretty quickly in their context, it wasn't like 6 weeks. It was 10, 20 years or whatever it was before the Pharaoh dies, so you can get buried in there and,
that's their eternal laughter.
Yeah, that's where the aliens then pick you up at the top of the pyramid.
Can you just stop with the alien stuff? So for them, actually, time was something that they were trying to maximize for on a certain level. So they churned through labor like nobody's business.
Oh, if you're a slave building a pyramid, you're not going to last that long.
Oh, the hernia rate was incredible among those slaves.
But they didn't
care.
They didn't care about that, right? Whereas you contrast that to the we talked about cathedral building, cathedral thinking before. They were building these things over centuries, So in the sense, time was the thing that they were not optimizing.
But they wanted to have craftsmanship, right?
Right.
Yes. So they were willing to hire people like good wages and all these guilds that formed, and you had to make sure you knew what you're doing because these arches had to be perfect.
And they probably were constrained by energy
and money,
and they're constrained by labor on some level.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So these are calculations that societies have made. Now we're not thinking about it at all, other than thinking about like two options, like time and labor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's really thought of when it comes to energy, right? Because it's just, like we said, it's always been there.
Yeah.
So what is doing the opposite then? We start working towards being efficient with energy and materials, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, how are we going to do that?
And it's hard because right now they're cheap and abundant, right? So that's why we call it do the opposite.
Well, we have to limit ourselves.
Yeah, because I think what we're saying, it's not going to happen with the economic system that we have in place.
Well, here's the rub, right? Where it'll happen. It will happen to us, or we could do it to ourselves. If we do it to ourselves on some level, we might be able to, actually have future humans living on this planet. If we don't, and we'll have other species to enjoy this planet with. If we don't do that.
Yeah. Then it's dig a backhoe, use a backhoe and dig the graves.
Sorry.
But anyway, this reminds me of the Amish, what you're saying, a culture.
Right, they actually do limit themselves.
That says, I'm going to limit the technology, the tools I choose.
Right.
The tools they choose are tools that actually limit their power, right? And that's interesting. They're deciding, okay, I'm going to use horses and I'm not going to use these machines that put the fossil fuels in, right? So I think, choosing your tools and deciding what you're going to do with them and how much power you're going to wield.
Now, I understand they're able to do this because they're a tight-knit community and have a lot of religious ideals, values that they're trying to follow. Do either of you have any idea why they came up with that point, that the tool set, like we're going to limit it right here?
No, I don't remember.
No, I don't know. But I think what's important here, and I think there's trade-offs with this, is it's not just a collection of individuals who are like, hey, we're all going to band together and kind of agree on these limits. They strongly reinforce with social norms that I think can come with some real restriction on people's freedom, individuality, these kinds of things. And that gets to the fact that it's not just an individual making a choice, it's these reinforcing cultural norms and expectations and probably laws and societies that create the conditions to restrict these things.
That's why I wish we had things like rationing of energy, right?
And I think it's really important for those of us who are thinking about like climate, for example, and limiting carbon, whether you want to have a carbon tax or not have a carbon tax, or what is the price you want to put a carbon or not. If we don't have a cap on it, an actual cap on it, I'm very skeptical and concerned about our ability to limit ourselves the way that we need to.
Until the constraints bite and we go,
which is
reindeer.
In a sense, too late.
It's too late.
Maybe it's not that too late, but still very painful, very difficult.
Right. So clearly we need to be working on policies that limit our use of energy uptake, or limit our energy uptake and limit our ability to wield power.
And creating social norms and cultural...
Right. So this whole system change, but... that's all well and good, but we don't have to wait for that either. I think we also need to look in our own households and in our own individual behavior. What is it that we can do that goes along those lines? We gave the example earlier how Greta took the sailboat across the Atlantic. She clearly made this trade-off, one of those choice trade-offs, time versus energy expenditure.
Yeah, and we talked about how amazing bicycles are, right?
Yeah.
They take a little more time. It takes about twice as long to bike into town as it does to drive. So it's not that
I think
bad.
the hard part there, again, you're still fighting some cultural norms, right? Like, oh, you have to be at your job at this time, and you got to be over here to pick up the kids from school at that time. And
it's a chain errand.
I'm not saying that you couldn't do it by bike. It's really about finding ways to get the job done without having to maximize power.
Well, so I mean,
really creative.
This is why I basically have just stopped using my body for anything. I mean, I don't exercise at all. I don't lift anything more than I think 1.5 pounds, something like that. So. I've created conditions where basically I have no power.
You actually stay in the cockpit of your backhoe and use that for all tasks.
Is this your excuse at home when Kirsten
exactly
asks you to do chores?
Yeah, can't do it. I am trying to minimize my power.
Well, you're very not powerful. Richard Heinberg is a senior fellow here at the Post-Carbon Institute, so he's one of our gang members. He is one of the world's foremost experts on the history of fossil fuels and a respected advocate for the shift to a renewable energy economy, which includes a strong case for the limits to growth. More importantly, he's written tons of stuff, spoken at events all over the world, and appeared in dozens of media productions. And his most recent book, with a publication date of September 2021, is Power: Limits and Prospects for Human Survival. But I'd also like to say what I think Richard is really best at is breaking down complex and nuanced topics and explaining them with logic and insight so that anyone can understand it. He's really a natural-born teacher, and I'm happy to count him as a friend and colleague here at Post Carbon. Richard, welcome to Crazy Town.
Hey, Rob. Good to be in Crazy Town with you. Thank you.
Well, yeah, maybe to some extent, right? Okay, I got a lot of questions for you. Jason, Asher, and I have been engaged in a conversation about the maximum power principle as one of the hidden drivers that has pushed humanity into the sustainability crisis. I know you've spent a lot of time considering physical and social power while you've been working on your book, Power. So first off, I'm curious if there was a topic that surprised you or especially stood out as you dove into your research on the book.
Yeah, well, I think what stood out to me was just the immense variety in the expression of power. On a pound-for-pound basis, life is actually far more powerful than the sun. And that, I know that seems incredible, but the sun is very massive, and if you divide its mass by its luminosity, and then compare that with the rate of energy transfer in the average cell, the cell wins every time. Life is just amazingly powerful. And from the very first living cell right up to the present, life and evolution have been all about gathering and using energy to do things. And what an amazing variety of things living beings have learned to do. Moving, sensing, thinking, reproducing, communicating, fighting, cooperating. The list goes on and on. And it's not just all about survival and reproduction. It's also about beauty. Animals that reproduce through sex have found ways of attracting mates, and flowering plants that have to be pollinated have learned amazing ways to attract pollinators. Now, for animals, the production of beauty often becomes an obsession in and of itself, apart from its value in sexual selection. And the result is that nature is just incredibly beautiful. And it's not just an inadvertent byproduct of everything else they're doing. And I'm not talking about beauty just in terms of human subjective impressions. No, what I discovered is that nature is intentionally beautiful. It works hard at it. And again, all of this is the result of the workings of power.
Wow, that's actually kind of inspiring, right? That nature, we can like sleep better at night knowing that nature is working hard at being beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that insight, and I'm one of the lucky people who has gotten a chance to read your book ahead of publication, and it's got the usual amount of clarity and organization, excellent writing that you're known for. But what I really appreciated about it was the depth of analysis. It's my sense that this book took you on a different sort of journey maybe than previous writing experiences. And I want to know if my sense is correct there, or in other words, could you describe what the process of researching and writing this book has meant to you?
Well, I've always been kind of a big picture guy. And my MO is mostly to synthesize other people's work. Of course, I aim for the best, the latest thinking about the most important questions. And there's a lot of that in this book as well. I ended up reading literally dozens of books and lots more technical articles as I was preparing to write this book. And it turned out to be an opportunity to brush up on the latest findings and thinking in fields from cell biology to anthropology to communications theory to game theory. And it was pretty exhilarating. A lot has changed in these fields in just the last few years. But at the same time, on this occasion, I feel I may also have made an original contribution. The word power certainly gets used a lot, but to my knowledge, nobody has tried to tie together power's many meanings and manifestations in the world and to look for links and commonalities and general rules. I found myself having to define power rather carefully, depending on the context. And then I had to reflect on what I thought I had found and look for exceptions and see if this was really true. Of course, that's just critical thinking, nothing new there. But it was exciting to be in somewhat unexplored territory and with a responsibility for mapping it properly for others who might follow.
While you were describing that, Richard, I was glad to hear that you're the one taking on that responsibility. I can't think of anyone any more well qualified. In fact, I was thinking if I were in that position, I might just have to quit writing. But we well know that you didn't do that. So thank you.
I can't help myself. I probably should, but I don't know.
Well, one of the main points that you make, or a big case that you make in the book, is that we humans have to control our thirst for power. And you also claim that we have the capacity to do that. And you go on to recommend a new principle that you call the optimum power principle. I was hoping you could describe what you mean by that and how it might interact with the maximum power principle, and then how you see the quest to limit power playing out.
Right. Well, the optimum power principle is not an alternative to the maximum power principle. It's more an addition to it. And in a way, it's nothing new. Everybody knows that life is full of checks and balances, whether it's homeostasis within organisms and systems and cells, or predator-prey relationships in ecosystems. In human societies, there are always ways of at least partially preventing the accumulation of too much political or economic power. Like in modern societies, we have environmental regulations to keep us from overrunning nature and redistributive programs to keep economic inequality from growing to catastrophic extremes. Of course, these measures aren't always sufficient either in nature or human society. That's why societies sometimes collapse. My book makes the argument that our current efforts to limit and share power are falling way behind where they would need to be in order to avert a crisis. But to my knowledge, no one has given this general phenomenon a name before, this tendency of living systems to find ways to limit or balance power. And actually, Rob, the specific term came from you in a conversation we were having early on about the book.
Wow.
Anyway, once we have a name for something, it sometimes becomes easier to see it and to recognize it. Just last week, I heard a podcast about the discovery of a protein within cells called mTOR. And this protein senses when there's sufficient food and space for the organism to expand. If there is, the protein triggers growth. If there isn't, it instructs the cell or the organism to shut down growth and instead engage in repair activities. So there's the optimum power principle at work at the cellular level. It's everywhere, really.
Wow. I had forgotten the conversation we had, so I'm happy to steal some credit, but I don't think I really deserve any there. Yeah, that's really amazing and an interesting idea that if you look around, you can find it in places, the optimum power principle, where you weren't necessarily expecting it, like this mTOR protein that you're talking about. So I'm wondering then if, like you said, that some parts of society have struggled with dealing with kind of keeping their power in check, and maybe they would even tend toward collapse. I'm wondering if you could give us some good examples of how an individual or a community of individuals could go against that sort of a tide when it comes to their relationship with power. So the question is really, how can we limit our power as individuals, not continually expand it, while also trying to live the good life?
Yeah, that's a good one. I guess you could say that indigenous peoples, and especially hunter-gatherers, were the original power geniuses. They eliminated bullies through ostracism or, if necessary, by executing them. They made all their important decisions by consensus. And authority within their societies was always situational, depending on who had the relevant skills and experience. men had their areas of special ability and women had theirs. Of course, it wasn't paradise, and groups sometimes fought each other over foraging territory. But when you look back, just about everything that we try to do in modern civilization to keep economic and political power within bounds can be seen as a way of trying to somehow approximate or recover the balance and the freedoms that we enjoyed back then. But of course, now we have vast power in the form of fossil fuels, and that's really upset our relations with nature and with one another. Somehow we've got to limit that power, or the whole human enterprise goes bust. Of course, collectively, our challenge is to zero out our carbon emissions, but this is ultimately going to require behavior change. I've always advocated like day-long or week-long energy fasts as a way of coming to understand just how dependent we are personally on these relatively new energy sources and how freeing it is to unplug. That makes it easier to come to grips with the kinds of collective restraints we'll need in order to minimize the threat of climate change. Maybe we can think of similar sorts of exercises to help ourselves think more creatively about species extinctions and resource depletion, pollution, and economic inequality. Moderation and reciprocity have to start somewhere, and the best place is in our own lives, in our own households, our communities. It's a matter of noticing how much power you have that's actually contributing to environmental destruction and inequality, and how you take it for granted. And then of finding other ways of sharing and using power that are less harmful and that actually make you feel empowered by doing something, even if it's as simple as sharing with your neighbors or going for a walk or paying attention to nature. So it's as much about finding new forms of power as it is about giving up power altogether.
Well, you always have a way of helping me and people that read your works see the world differently, and I really appreciate that about you. Richard Heinberg is the author of Power, Limits and Prospects for Human Survival, set for publication in September of 2021. You can find out more about that at postcarbon.org. Thanks so much, Richard, for visiting Crazy Town.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, Rob. Good talking with you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Crazy Town.
Yeah, if by some miracle you actually got something out of it, please take a minute and give us a positive rating or leave a review at your preferred podcast app.
And thanks to all our listeners, supporters, and volunteers. And special thanks to our producer, Melody Travers.
Hey guys, I'm thinking I might have to take a little respite from the show.
What?
Not right away. I have to plan this out carefully, but it's actually something I learned about one of our sponsors.
Oh.
It's called the Power Down Bar.
Oh, was it invented by Richard Heinberg?
It was sort of inspired. He inspired the inventors of this, but also they were inspired by the notions of the maximum power principle and the need to sort of work with our environment. So I'm thinking over the winter, I'm going to take one of these. What it does, you eat one and you won't wake up for about 5 months. So I might do like 3/4 of one.
How many calories are in this fucking thing?
Well, not many calories. In fact, there's actually a problem in that you should put on a lot of extra weight before you eat one of these because you're going to lose 40 to 80 pounds.
In hibernation?
In hibernation.
Right. I'm glad, Jason, that you have such good relations with our sponsors because you're the one who's going to put you down for 5 months.
So this is a bar that basically has this massive shot of like heroin in it or something. Like it just...
It's a proprietary ingredient.
Oh, we don't know what it is.
I don't even know, but it's been approved. Okay, so it's totally legal, totally on the up and up.
Totally legal. Okay.
And hey, it really cuts down on laundry. You save money on. You can cancel all your subscriptions.
You need somebody to come in every once in a while and turn you over so you don't get these bed sores.
Well,
right?
there is that additional cost. So
and a catheter to put in. Sorry, I don't mean to.
Okay, now that we've
details.
gotten there, can we just say happy hibernation and be on our way?
Clear your calendars. Eat a power down bar, folks.
Crazy town, da 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 da, crazy town.